Welcome to CTR Cyber 5. 5 tips in 5 minutes to improve cybersecurity internal controls. I am your host, Jenny Hederman, Risk Counsel with the Office of the Comptroller. Our guest today is Scott Foote, Managing Director of the Phenomenati Group. Scott has a huge list of credentials. He has worked in information systems and IT since the 1980s as an engineer, product executive, analyst, board member, and most recently as a CISO and a chief privacy officer. His background in business leadership and product market strategy blends well with his expertise in cybersecurity, privacy, risk, and compliance to help build security and privacy programs that are well aligned to the business of his clients. Scott is going to be sharing 5 tips talking to leadership about cybersecurity. And we'll jump right into cyber tip number 1. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you for having me, Jenny. So the first tip I would start with is start with the end in mind. I say this often before we go into a boardroom when I'm coaching a CIO or a CISO. Manage the expectation of the audience. Are you going in for just an informative briefing? Are you going in to let them know something is going to happen and you're looking for their alignment, their support? Or are you asking for a decision? Often we take it for granted when we walk into these environments. What we don't acknowledge is the fact that the room that we're speaking to is probably wrestling with 30 or more decisions in the time frame that we have to brief them. So we should be very clear. And this is true if you're going into the boardroom or even if you've got your 30-second elevator pitch. Make sure that you set the expectation. Hey, CEO, I just want to make you aware we're dealing with a risk scenario that the threat has accelerated. We'll talk to you more about it in depth another time, but set that expectation so that the audience knows what are they going to do with the information you present. That is fundamental to let them prepare to be able to ask questions and maybe set up for a follow-up.
Great.
Number 2 would be to speak in business terms. And this is a colloquialism we hear now all the time on the internet, right? In terms of get ready to go talk to the C-suite. Make sure that you're speaking in business terms. What's important to remember here is that security is not the what, security is the how. What we're trying to achieve is reduce risk. We have obligations as an organization. We need to recognize that controls help us reduce the risk of violating those obligations. So start with the business terms. We're trying to avoid breaching this contract. We're trying to avoid breaching this obligation we have to privacy. The risk scenario is, and then express it in terms of the business. We could lose the information, right? We could lose trust with our constituencies. But understanding that the business terms are what your audience both speaks in, but they also think, and that's how they prioritize their decisions. Don't show up with an explanation where you're going to teach them what Cobalt Strike is and why this payload happened on this particular server with this vulnerability. That's not actionable. They can't do anything with that. Stick to the business terms and you'll find that you make a lot more impact in the communications you have with leadership.
Cyber tip.
This is another one that's important, and I find that I'm often coaching people after they've done a briefing, and this is the first thing that we come back to. Be concrete. Don't be abstract. Don't speak in broad terms like risk appetite. That's a very broad term that's not really actionable. It leaves people feeling angst, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but it doesn't leave them with any tools on which they can act. Instead, be concrete. So when I speak about risk with clients, we don't speak about it abstractly. We go right to what are the risk scenarios. Let's talk about the most important scenarios that you are trying to defend against, whether it's a breach of confidentiality for your constituencies, maybe it's a breach of integrity. We don't talk about those risk scenarios often enough, but certainly we might be looking at breaches of availability. We've had a loss in service. Understanding that those risk scenarios need to be concrete so that any follow-on discussion is actionable, rather than just leaving them with those feelings of concern and feeling like there's nothing they can do about it.
Cyber tip.
Categorize your recommendations. We talked about this on another one of the tips, but I'm very fond of putting a simple matrix together that has across the top, prevent, detect, and correct. That's the adversary's timeline. We're preventing them from getting in, we're detecting them once they're in, and we're correcting them after they've done damage. But the full array of administrative, physical, and technical controls. When I go in to explain to someone we need to spend another X thousand dollars on security awareness, I make it clear that's a preventative control. We're preventing phishing, social engineering, but it's an administrative control. It's not technical. We're patching our users, so to speak, by preventing them from having an event, but we're doing it administratively. Where something like, dealing with a backup, that's a technical control, but it's more restorative or corrective, making sure the backup is in place to be restored. To be able to categorize your recommendations to explain how they fit in a bigger plan, that also gives someone the sense that this isn't just going and trying to put out fires as they're popping up. We actually have a program in each of these controls or recommendations. They fit within the broader program.
And cybersecurity 5.
This one has come back repeatedly with one of my partners here. We are constantly engaged in these conversations with our clients, and he's coaching the staff to say, what's the hard ask? When you're engaged with leadership, make sure that you are concrete about what you're asking. Are you asking for an investment? Are you asking for, maybe it's an investment to continue to research the problem, but be clear about that hard ask. Be clear in terms of what's the dollar value or the hours or the staffing level that you're looking at. Be clear about the total staffing hours, but also what's the extended time frame, the duration. The hard ask is so critically important. You don't want to leave somebody thinking that you haven't structured your request yet. If you're truly looking for a response and a commitment, then go for the hard ask. And don't be afraid to. Clarity is much better than leaving things like, did they ask me to take action or not? And I don't have a sense for whether it's a $10 million problem or a $10,000 problem.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott Foote, for helping us be more cyber aware in Massachusetts. For more information on cybersecurity internal controls, check out our cyber page at macomptroller.org. Thank you for watching CTR 5, and we'll see you again.